Well, hello. We're going to get started in just a minute. See if we can get a few things together. Well, hello. We're going to get started in just a minute. Yes, let me get us together. I think we're rocking and rolling pretty good. You see, I'm cleaning off the printer to make sure we're together. But yes, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is episode number 2 of Boomer Chronicles. I am Cheryl Renee Moses. I am your host for today. And our channel, Boomer Chronicles, we are baby boomers and we're covering topics from all around, covering everything that are, hot topics happening daily. So we meet every Thursday at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8, and we will provide commentary as well as guests. So today we want to just hop right into this. Would like to talk about gun violence. Today we want to talk about the shooting here actually in Georgia. I'm zooming in from Lawrenceville, Georgia, part of Metro Atlanta, and just wanted to talk about gun violence and why I think we as baby boomers should really be more proactive in pushing our politicians as well as speaking to our youth. Uh, well, all of us, because there are folks from all ages are out here really wreaking havoc uh, with guns. So we want to talk about that today. Um, before we get into the conversation of what happened here in Georgia, I want to just lay out some brief statistics. I love numbers. You all know I love numbers. So let's look at some statistics on gun violence in the United States and how we claim to be this great nation, but we rank at the bottom when it comes to gun violence, homicides, and you know things that there are other countries, there are other continents that don't have this type of gun violence at all. So if we're going to be a superior country, let's be superior in all things. I'm Cheryl Renee Moses. I am going to go ahead and get us started on um, a video I would like for us to watch. And as I tell everyone, please, grab some form of note taking, whether you're doing it with a pad of pencil or you're using a digital device in order to take notes. But let's take notes so that the thoughts that you have as we are going through this information, I want you to uh, be able to reflect upon that with yourself as well as those who are within your immediate social circle, your family, and those in your extended family and social circle. So let's just get started. I have a video that I want to share with you. It is the title is The State of Gun Violence in the United States, and it's explained in 18 charts. If you look at what we know visually. If a person can see it, reading is fine, but visually, a picture is worth a million words. So in this video, we will be looking at some charts that explain where the United States actually sits right now. And actually, this video was done some years ago, but this is even to show you that the issue of gun violence in the United States is not a new story. And we'll talk a little later because, you know, gun rights folks always talk about how they have the right from the Second Amendment. And I'm a gun owner. And I'm good with a gun. But I want us to understand that there are countries that they have absolutely no gun violence. And if there was a mandate in this country to get rid of all guns, I'll be one of the first in line to surrender mine. All right, so let's hop into this, and then we'll have a bit of conversation after. I am going to share my screen. And again, I'm Cheryl Renee Moses, and this is Boomer Chronicles. You can find us at IamABabyBoomer.com. Check us out, and you are making history because you're part of our second episode of this podcast. And thank you for your patience.
We need rescue inside the auditorium, multiple victims.
The United States has a problem with gun violence.
We hold the victims in our hearts.
Perhaps we may never fully understand it.
A man with a semi-automatic weapon.
We talk about it after mass shootings, but it's much larger and more complicated than those debates allow.
That is not accurate.
Here's what you need to know about the state of gun violence in America. It's true that the U.S. sees many more mass shootings than these other developed countries. Between 2000 and 2014, there were 133 mass shootings in public populated places. That's excluding gang violence and terrorism. Of course, the U.S. is a much larger country, but if you adjust for population size, it still ranks higher. Of these countries, Finland is next, with just 2 shootings over 14 years, but a much, much smaller population. And this type of tragedy seems to be happening more often in the U.S. Each of these squares represents a public mass shooting with 4 or more fatalities. Before 2011, they happened 6 months apart on average. But since then, only 2 months go by between them.
I hope and pray that I don't have to come out again during my tenure as president to offer my condolences to families in these circumstances.
That was October 1st, 2015. And just about 2 months later,
Yesterday, a tragedy took San Bernardino. Our first order of business is to send our thoughts and prayers to the families of those who've been killed.
public mass shootings get all the attention because they're often so indiscriminate. But the truth is, mass shootings are unlike most gun deaths in America. Here's how it breaks down. According to the most recent data, 92 people are killed with guns every day on average. About 30 of those are homicides, of which maybe 1.5 at most can be considered part of mass shootings. Most of those killed, 58 people a day, are suicides. The rest are accidental shootings, police actions, and undetermined incidents. Those suicides, they show up in international comparisons too. These are the 10 countries ranked highest on human development by the UN. The US has the highest suicide rate among them, and this darker bar shows how many of those are with guns. Some people think suicide isn't really relevant to the gun issue,
But to go and think that some type of gun control regulations that are being talked about are going to stop somebody from committing suicide when there's so many other ways for people to commit suicide.
But the methods that people use are important because suicide attempts often stem from temporary crises. The vast majority of people who survive suicide attempts don't end up dying from suicide, but guns make it nearly impossible to get that second chance. The victims of gun suicides are overwhelmingly men and mostly white. And the rate of gun suicides has been increasing in the US. At the same time, the rate of gun homicides has been decreasing, especially since the 90s when crime rates in general were higher. But if you compare the US to other developed countries, it doesn't look like good news. These are homicides adjusted for population size. The US would probably have a higher homicide rate even without guns, but you can see how gun violence pushes that rate far beyond the other countries here. The victims of these shootings, they're not the ones you often see on the national news. They're disproportionately young black men.
You guys can leave here and go on with your lives, but we gotta go home to empty rooms because our children's lives were taken away by people who should not have had guns anyway.
One possible explanation is that the US simply has more crime than those other countries. But if you set aside homicides for a moment and look at rates of burglary or assault, you don't see that same spike that you see with homicide. It's not that America has much more crime. It's that crime in the US is much more lethal. Altogether, the number of gun deaths in the US from 2000 to 2013 exceeds the number of Americans killed by AIDS, by illegal drug overdoses, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and terrorism combined. It should be clear by now that this level of gun violence is a uniquely American problem among the developed world. And here's one reason why. There are a ton of guns in the US. This chart shows the estimated number of guns by country. It's adjusted for population size, and it's still not even close.
The question that I would like to ask is how on earth could he compile 13 guns? How can that happen?
If you take a look back at the 10 countries with the highest levels of human development, you can see that it's really easy to get a gun in the US. All of the other countries require a license to purchase most guns, and those purchases are recorded into an official registry. To get that license, people have to state a reason for why they want a gun. And in most of these countries, they have to pass a safety test and are required by law to store their guns safely. In part because of its lax laws, there are well over 300 million guns in the US, and counting. This chart doesn't reflect private sales, but it shows the number of background checks, which all federally licensed dealers have to run. It suggests that the demand for guns has been increasing steeply since Barack Obama took office. So we've looked at gun deaths and at gun ownership. This chart puts them together. It shows that among highly developed countries, the more guns in a country, the more gun deaths. You can see that countries like Switzerland, which have relatively more guns than a country like the Netherlands, also have a higher gun death rate. And here's the US. Likewise, US states with more guns have more gun homicides. There are outliers like Idaho, which has higher rates of gun ownership but low rates of gun murders. But overall, there's a correlation between gun ownership and homicide rates. And that relationship has held up in studies that control for things like poverty, unemployment, and crime. The correlation between gun ownership and gun deaths is even stronger for suicides. It makes sense. Depression with a gun is more dangerous than depression without one. Likewise, fights, domestic disputes, road rage, drunkenness, all much more dangerous with a gun than without. That said, you might need different policies to keep guns away from potential mass shooters than you would to keep them out of inner city gangs or out of the hands of someone who might hurt themselves. America doesn't have a gun problem. It has several of them.
Yes, the United States has a serious gun problem, an epidemic. And who are typically the mass shooters? Studies show that most mass shooters are young white men who are conducting these heinous crimes across the country. But how can we, as senior citizens, put a push on our politicians, our communities, as well as feed into our younger generations and look at initiatives that are providing outlets? Now, one of the first things I will say is that white parents, you know your child. You also know how you were raised and your racist ideas and biases that you may not even realize that you are putting forth, that your kids are learning, but your kids are also learning from how the United States and the world operates. And so with that being the case, I want to challenge white mothers and fathers. You know what you're raising as far as the mentality and how you're putting forth perhaps a racist or biased household. We are all just humans. The color of our skins, the color of our skin only makes us unique in the pool of humans. All right, so I want to move on, want to go to our next video. Want to look again at, let's see, 770. Want to look at another perspective on U.S. gun deaths and mass shootings compared to other countries, and then we're gonna look at the shooting here in Georgia that happened yesterday. Want to look at that, and in this situation, and we'll talk more about it, the 14-year-old was already on the FBI watch list. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can watch this short video.
When it comes to mass shootings, the U.S. is an outlier. We spoke to Adam Langford, a professor of criminology at the University of Alabama. He's looked at how the U.S. compares to other countries when it comes to this issue. But there's a problem when comparing the U.S. to another country, because mass shootings are overall fairly rare, and some countries are very small, so one event can skew the data. So here's what he did. He looked at how shootings in the U.S. compare to whole continents, areas with really big populations comparable to this country's 300+ million people. And when looking at it that way, the U.S. has many more mass shooters than the rest of the world, more than 1 per every 10 million people between 1998 and 2012. No other continent comes even close. Overall, the U.S. represents about 30% of mass shooters worldwide, with less than 5% of the world's population. It's severely overrepresented in this disturbing category. Now let's take a look at gun homicides overall, not just mass shootings. And here we actually can compare to other countries because these are much more common. On this measure too, the U.S. stands out compared to peer nations of similar wealth. David Hemingway, a professor of health policy at Harvard, sent us the latest data he analyzed. As of 2015, more than 4 out of 100,000 people in the United States were killed using a gun. That's way above all other rich countries he and his co-author looked at. Of course, not all gun deaths are homicides. When you include suicides, accidental and undetermined deaths by firearms, the United States still stands alone. It's important to recognize that this is looking at countries with a similar economic standing as the U.S. There are other countries in the world where gun deaths are more common than the United States. Venezuela, Guatemala, Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador, Brazil, Jamaica, and Afghanistan stand out as having much higher gun death rates. and a number of countries like Mexico have similar rates. But there is one other place where the U.S. is a clear outlier when it comes to this issue compared to the rest of the world: gun ownership. There, the U.S. is all by itself.
Wow.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the video.
And just knowing how the United States stands out as an outlier as far as gun ownership. And I want you to really pay attention to that gun ownership in the United States is totally different than any other place on this earth. And with that being the case, we need strict gun laws, need to eliminate the easy accessibility to guns. I mean, we're looking at a 14-year-old here in Georgia who went on a mass killing spree. 14. And they say that this 14-year-old was already on the FBI's radar, but yet he was not. He was able to still do this. Let me just say that, because the problem with what we are seeing is that those who are pushing forward the Second Amendment and their rights to own a gun, well, at this point, I'm all about my right to be able to go outside and feel safe in the United States. And so that should be the priority of everybody, not these gun lobbyists, the NRA. And I used to be a member of NRA. I was certified as an instructor of NRA, but that's a whole different topic that, we can touch on at some point. But I still contend that we have easy access to guns. Legally, we have much too much access to guns, not even talking about the underground, the black market, and how someone that's 14 years old is able to have these guns. And I'm laughing at those folks who want to persist in saying that, we need Second Amendment rights. Second Amendment rights is what's allowing all of this non-regulation to allow these youth, kids. And it's not just the regulations. We'll talk on a different time about the social media, how our youth, and even us who are older, being brainwashed on social media with all of this violence. And it's a lot that is pouring into this. But those of us who are baby boomers, we have a great opportunity to be able to infuse wisdom into those that we actually come in contact with, as well as pressure those who are elected to represent us, because based on statistics, baby boomers are one of the largest voting blocs that's out here. So we'll talk more about that, but I do want to show a video, and want to send condolences to the two students and the teachers of Appalachian I hope I'm saying that right. School, and just asking the Most High to have a hand upon all of the kids, the parents, the teachers, the resource officers, the staff, everybody that has something to do with that would definitely like to have a moment of silence and a big sending of prayers continuously for the days, not just now, but the days upcoming. So I want to thank the Most High for each family that has been affected by this gun violence and sending healing prayers to all that have been affected, and that each of us will receive the healing that we need to move forward. And so it is. So I'm going to go ahead and show just a commentary about what I am finding.
Advertising is big.
What I'm finding a bit interesting in that the FBI had already had this person on their radar, and I'm really, really surprised that this person had not already been detained. And you all, I'm rocking and rolling
This morning, new detective.
On getting this video downloaded, but I'm really surprised that I'm surprised that this young man, that was a year ago, so he was 13 at the time, he had allegedly sent threats about doing a school shooting, and his parents, he and his parents, I guess, were interviewed, but there was no evidence that allowed the law enforcement, FBI, to do any type of arrest. And here we are a year later. And I will want to thank our law enforcement officers that they were even on the case to identify that. But again, we need to have stricter laws, as well as intense processes. Y'all, I'm sorry, I heard a noise outside. Intense processes and procedures all around this, as well as new laws. You know, we need to get rid of guns in the United States, period. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this video up. We have about 30 more minutes left in this second episode. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and please spread the word to all of your friends who are baby boomers, as well as those who want to get some wisdom and hear the perspective of baby boomers on everything that's happening in the world. And we'll be doing segments on those things specific to baby boomers. All right, so let me pull this up. And again, I'm Cheryl Renee Moses. I am your host for today, and I'm delighted to be here with you. After this session, we will immediately go into our 8 to 9 session, virtual session for boomers for Harris. Lord, my tongue is twisted, but boomers for Harris. So we'll be showing a video and discussing on Harris's stand on gun violence and gun ownerships and gun laws that are needed. Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen so that we can watch this video.
This morning, new details in the Georgia high school
Let
shooting
me
that killed
stop.
2 students and 2 teachers.
Let me stop that. All right, so I'll share my screen. Thank you for your patience. And here we go.
This morning, new details in the Georgia high school shooting that killed 2 students and 2 teachers. There are new questions about possible missed warning signs, and we're standing by for the 14-year-old suspect's first court appearance. The alleged gunman is expected to face murder charges as an adult. Officials are now revealing he was questioned about online threats to shoot up a school just last year. Police are trying to learn how he was able to get an AR-15 style rifle and why he turned it on his classmates. This morning, those classmates are describing the terror and the panic they felt as they hid and ran for safety at school.
I was scared I was going to die, to be honest. And when I heard hard lockdown, I knew it wasn't a drill. I just kept my feet up and I prayed, and I closed my eyes and I tried to stay calm, but I was shaking. I was worried that they would hear me.
Then I hear the gunshots, and then everyone ducks behind the desk, and the teacher is like flipping tables and stuff and barricading the door. So I was just scared out of my mind.
I did not personally know anybody that was hurt, but we were sitting at the field up there. One of my cadets was going through it, and we found out his friend was killed, sadly.
It is such a sickening tragedy. A school has just started, and here we are with a school shooting. Here are the 14-year-olds being remembered today and the 2 teachers. 4 heartbroken families as grief engulfs another American community. We will share more with you about the victims' lives. But first, CNN Nick's Valencia is live at the school just about an hour outside of Atlanta. What are some of the new details that you have been learning in this case?
Yeah, chilling details this morning, Sarah, in a really heavy atmosphere around the school. The alleged gunman identified as 14-year-old Colt Gray, a student at Appalachia High School, somebody who was familiar to law enforcement. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we're also learning about the caliber style of weapon that was used, an AR-15. The community, though, really focused on the victims and trying to huddle around the families that were impacted by this. Late last night, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation releasing the names of those victims, 2 of them students, just 14 years old. One of them identified as Mason Skirmerhorn, the other classmate Christian Angulo, 2 of them teachers, those adults, one of them a 53-year-old math teacher, Christina Irami, and the other Richard Aspinwall, who also was a coach on the football team, a defensive coordinator. The 39-year-old was a teacher here. He was beloved, and in fact, we interviewed a student of his who described him as just being a really, really sweet person. Among the other victims, though, that were injured, 9 altogether, 8 of them students, 1 of them an adult, and yesterday we were bringing you details of that adult who we know that was shot in the stomach, was in surgery yesterday during the hours that I was reporting, still waiting on an update on their condition. But we are getting new information from the students here who were eyewitnesses. And was yesterday my colleague Isabel Rosales caught up with one of the students here impacted by the tragedy.
I just remember, like, the moment that it happened, he was at the door, and I knew they were looking for him already, but he was at the door, and they almost let him in until they backed up, and then he turned away, and that's when you hear like the first rounds of fire.
So he was in class with you, in algebra class, he left. Then he came back, was at the door, and then knocking to be let back in. Why? You told me something about the doors.
Yeah, they lock automatically, so you have to be let in to come back into our classroom. So I think he wanted to come to us first.
Come to you first to shoot?
Yes, to shoot us.
The big questions this morning: where is Gray? When will he be seen next? When will his first court appearance, and will he be facing charges as an adult? Sarah?
All right, Nick Valencia, thank you so much. A lot of people don't remember those who have been shot, not just killed. There is so much tragedy there in that community. John.
All right, CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller is with us now. Nick just alluded to this, John, but The shooter was on the radar of law enforcement, federal law enforcement, in 2023 when the FBI picked up on some kind of a message board, then related it down to local authorities. What more could have been done there?
I'm not sure anything more could have been done. When you look at the system and ask, well, did the system work? Tips came in from the public. That's people on the internet who saw this threat to shoot up a school coming from a handle on a gaming website. They then sent that to an FBI threat line that you can reach online, which goes to the NTOC, the National Threat Operations Center. They then take those tips and they run it down. Where's this IP address where this threat came from? Who's the subscriber? Does it have a physical address? They then forward that to Jackson County Sheriff in Georgia. And Jackson County does not drop the ball. They send investigators out. They go to the house. They ask, is there somebody here that uses that computer? Yes, we have a son. Are there guns in the house? Yes, there are, but they're locked away and he doesn't have access to them. They question a 13-year-old boy who turns out to be our shooter a year later, and he says, that wasn't me. Somebody else must have done that threat to make it look like me. So they end up closing the case because it's not arrestable. It's probably not prosecutable. He's 13 years old. They even notify the local school district. But when they move from Jackson County to Barrow County, that information, we don't know whether that followed the Jackson County school to the Barrow County school. It's unlikely. But at that point, instead of looking at authorities who checked all the boxes, you really have to shift that look to where was the concern in that home? What was the level of that concern by the parents? How did they engage that child about that threat? And obviously, if that gun came from the house, there's another issue there.
We also were talking about the idea that this young man was a loner, right? Let's listen to what one of his classmates said.
Nothing too off. He was just another quiet kid that didn't really speak too much.
And I know you've been in school here for a few weeks. You've been sitting next to him all the way through? Did anything different today about him?
No, he wasn't here when when school first started. I think he transferred in, but nothing really seemed too off about him.
So what does that tell us? I mean, the idea that he's a loner, that he didn't really talk to other kids. He's also new in the school, so that could be perfectly normal. Or it could be a sign that he is feeling ostracized, that he is feeling as an outsider. We find that as a common theme in some of these young people involved in school shootings. And it has become a part of the school doctrine to kind of look for these signs, if there are concerns, to report them. Even the school had that electronic system that they installed a week ago. I think it's called Sengenics, where they press one button, the entire school goes on alert that there's an emergency or an active shooter. It goes into lockdown. This technology goes then right to the police, to the front office. Police can see on their devices where people are in the school, floor plans, maps. There's another company that came after the Fort Lauderdale shooting by an entrepreneur named Gino Rafaro, who set up Safer Watch. It does all that, but it also has an anonymous tip function where if someone has concerns about someone who may hurt people or may be contemplating self-harm, that you can report that. So these technology is catching up to some of our human failings in this area.
All right, John Miller, thank you so much. Keep us posted throughout the morning.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, that was such great information. And just to know that a week ago, the badge technology that allows you to press a button and alert the school and law enforcement. That's interesting, and glad that that was available so that law enforcement could respond immediately. But I want us to think about where we are. Look at the conversation that we are having. The United States is not a third world country. This is supposed to be pristine United States. And this gun violence, these mass shootings are happening. Something is wrong with that. Something that we need to address. And we need to not have it, we need to not allow these gun lobbyists to be able to dictate. And it's only a small group of them. It's not 100% of the citizens of the United States. We're talking about a small percentage that is decreasing every year. Yet their multitude of dollars and lobbying efforts has continued to allow politicians to have a need to push forward this nonsense of not having strict gun ownership laws. So I think I have one last. We're about to run out of time, but I think we do have one other video that I would like to share. I thought I had already downloaded it, but I want to know your comments. Go ahead and open up chat, and please give us your thoughts on gun violence in the United States. I want you to, tell us your thoughts. Are you a gun advocate? And as I said earlier, I'm definitely a gun advocate in that I own a gun, and once I bought a gun, I come from a family of law enforcement, but once I bought a gun for myself, I wanted to make sure I was trained in how to use it and how to have it safely housed in my home. And all of these things are such that if you're gonna have a gun, you need to be responsible and accountable. But again, if the United States said none of us could own a gun, and if you owned a gun or caught with one, that you would be put in jail forever. That you would never be able to come out of jail. I mean, these are the strict laws that I feel. Now, this is just me, not the board or the membership who support. I am a baby boomer, but for me, I'm like, hey, let's make it such that you won't do it. You won't even think about having a gun with the right laws. But all right, so I want to go ahead and get into our last video. And again, I own guns, and I'm very good at what I do as far as using a gun, but I would love to not have one. I didn't buy a gun until I was in my late 50s. I've gone all these decades without having a need or desire to have a gun, even coming from a law enforcement family. But today, that's a different conversation. All right, so let me get this one. And this video is talking about how even after all of the mass shootings, as we've watched, you would think that there would be immediate laws to change things. But we see in actuality and based on statistics, as mass shootings continue to happen, it seems laws become slacker and slacker. What? Help me with that. It's like, make it make sense. So let's watch this video, and then we will come back. Yeah, let's watch this.
It was the last Friday of the school year, and I had been actually subbing for a teacher for 3 days. It just seemed like a nice day.
On May 18th, 2018, a gunman entered a high school in Santa Fe, Texas, and opened fire.
I looked down and I realized in my pants, I had bloody holes in my pants, and I realized I'm shot.
The gunman killed 10 people. Flo Rice was shot 6 times.
And then finally, Scott managed to find me.
For 4 years, Flo and Scott have told their story over and over to push for new laws that could prevent mass shootings. It's made them part of a recurring conversation on guns in the U.S., and a cycle the country has seemed stuck in for decades. A mass shooting, a push for reform, and then no action.
The tragic school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas.
This time in El Paso. 9 people killed in Dayton.
How many years do we have to go through this?
Congress is paralyzed.
We collectively seem to ask the same question. What does it take to pass some gun reform in this country?
But here's the thing. This cycle of inaction on gun laws isn't exactly accurate. Over the past few decades, federal legislation on guns has been rare. But in state legislatures, mass shootings have led to new gun laws, thousands of them. And how those laws have emerged can tell us a lot about the future of guns in the U.S. In 2020, a study tried to determine the impact of mass shootings on gun policy. They looked at 25 years of high-profile mass shootings. Then they looked at gun legislation passed during that time, over 3,000 laws across all 50 states. When they took a closer look at those laws, a pattern emerged that at first seemed unsurprising. State legislatures controlled by Democrats were more likely to pass tighter gun laws. Republican-controlled states typically loosened gun laws. But they found a key difference. Mass shootings didn't have any statistically significant effect on the number of laws passed by Democrats, while for Republican legislatures, a mass shooting roughly doubles the number of laws enacted that loosen gun restrictions in the next year.
To arm more teachers, for example, or arm more school staff.
That's James Barragan, a politics reporter at the Texas Tribune.
There is more access to guns afterwards. A state like Texas would go more towards pro-gun policies in the aftermath of a gun shooting.
Texas has some of the loosest gun laws in the nation, and that matters for people all over the country.
People probably don't know about the importance of state gun laws and really state laws in general. Our gun laws at the federal level had been frozen in time since basically the 1990s, which allowed the states to have a much bigger role and a much bigger influence in how gun culture played out in their jurisdictions.
Let's look at Texas. In 1991, a gunman killed 23 people at a Luby's restaurant in Killeen, Texas. A woman there named Susanna Hupp lost both her parents in the shooting. She believed she could have stopped the massacre and turned her experience into a crusade for loosening gun laws.
I'm mad at my legislators for legislating me out of the right to protect myself and my family.
It worked. In 1994, Texas elected a new governor, George W. Bush, who made it legal to carry a concealed gun his first year in office and set off a trend in the state that's continued for decades. For example, in 2012, after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting drew attention to gun laws across the country, Texas responded a few months later by creating a program allowing some school employees to carry guns in school. In 2017, a gunman killed 26 people at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. Within 2 years, Texas made it legal to carry weapons in places of worship. But after the Santa Fe high school shooting, Governor Greg Abbott did something unusual. He asked lawmakers to consider a red flag law, which would allow authorities to take firearms away from a person courts deem dangerous.
That is not something that Republicans in the state often do.
Flo and Scott were also pushing for legislation in response to Santa Fe, like laws that would hold parents accountable if their guns were used by their children to harm people. They also pushed to make it harder to buy ammunition online.
Our shooter, he just checked a box and said, yes, I'm 18, and they delivered it to his doorstep. You can't get alcohol delivered without showing proof of ID or something, but he ordered ammunition.
Their hope for stricter laws was in line with Texas public opinion. Polling showed only a small minority of Texans supported loosening gun laws, and just over half supported tightening them.
We thought it was common sense that this would be done.
They came to Flo's hospital room the week of the shooting, and we had the governor, lieutenant governor, we had congressmen, we had senators, their wives, their chief of staff, all in her room at one time, at least 20 people, and said, we're gonna take care of you. We promise we'll be there for you. We'll fix this.
But in the end, these proposals, along with Abbott's openness to red flag laws, went nowhere.
After gun rights supporters went after him, the gun culture is strong, but the gun lobby itself also exerts a lot of pressure on Texas politicians.
There were bills that were put out there, but they never made it out of committee.
Later in 2019, 2 shootings in West Texas just weeks apart prompted Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick to suggest another tighter gun policy, closing background check loopholes.
That is a very strong comment from a lieutenant governor who is very pro-guns, who is very friendly with the NRA. But Republican leaders were saying we may have problems here. Democrats are pushing to take over the state house for the first time since 2003.
After elections were over, with Republicans still in control, in 2021, Texas passed constitutional carry. There would no longer be a requirement for Texans to have a license or receive any training to openly carry handguns.
For me, it's very scary because if I see someone in public with a gun, I will panic. That's going to send me into an anxiety attack.
That constitutional carry law that the state legislature passed in 2021 had been rejected by Republican leaders. But as the Republican Party has gone further and further to the right on issues, you get a fringe of the party that is much more vocal about all kinds of issues, including gun rights.
In recent years, a better organized gun control movement has seen more success with tightening laws in some states. But the movement to expand gun access isn't stopping. In 2002, fewer than half of the 50 states had one party in control of both the state legislature and the governor's office. Today, 3/4 of the states do. That means in the places where Republicans or Democrats have full control, they can push through new gun laws with little chance of a veto.
So what happens, and you see it in state house to state house, is one state passes a law that is very successful for one side of the aisle, and then another state house adopts a very, very similar law.
Remember that constitutional carry law in Texas? Today, 24 states have similar laws on the books for that too. And more than 400 local governments across 20 states have adopted variations on a Second Amendment sanctuary law, meaning a city, town, or county refuses to recognize any state or federal gun laws that they believe violate the Second Amendment.
These things get replicated, they get cloned, they go from state to state, and they essentially make up this patchwork of laws throughout the country.
In June 2022, in the aftermath of the Uvalde shooting in Texas, President Biden signed the most significant federal gun bill in 30 years. One thing it does is incentivize states to pass red flag laws. But it can't make them do it. That power still belongs to the states.
I have survivor's guilt because I'm alive, and so I feel like I have to keep speaking out. I have to do what I can. There's times when I just think I'm going to stop. I cannot do this for my own mental health, but we keep going.
Okay, so I really like that video because it brings up a lot of topics that I'm sure many of us have tossed those thoughts, ideas in our heads, but we've got to recognize that this is a epidemic, a problem for the United States, guns, gun violence, and we should be able to move forward with that. Want to thank you all for joining us. Hopefully, let me open up chat so that I can provide you a link from 8 to 9. It is Boomers for Harris. We are supporting Vice President Kamala Harris for President of the United States. And we have a session. We're going to talk about fundraising, but we also will continue our conversation about gun violence in the United States. We'll hear from Vice President Kamala Harris on her stand on that. And yeah, it'll be good. So I will go ahead and let's see, I should be able to put a link in chat for it, for the Zoom link. We do have some folks who have already signed up. We had a great session for episode 1. So I will go ahead and put information in chat. Here it is. All right. I just put the link for the Zoom for our meeting in 3 minutes. And I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cheryl Renee Moses, coming to you all from Lawrenceville, Georgia, Metro Atlanta. And I really appreciate your time and send nothing but a covering and blessings for you, your family, and all who are in your mix. And so it is. Bye.